What if I told you that every breakthrough in quantum physics over the last century has been nothing more than scientific confirmation of principles that ancient Egyptian priests mastered 5,000 years ago? What if the double-slit experiment, quantum entanglement, and the observer effect are just modern names for what the Hermetic masters called the fundamental laws of reality? In the next 30 minutes, I will show you how 7 specific quantum physics discoveries prove beyond doubt that the ancient Hermetic laws are not mystical philosophy, but precise descriptions of how reality works. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Einstein spent his final years studying ancient Sanskrit texts, why Tesla called the Hermetic principles the fundamental truths of the universe, and how modern physicists are accidentally rediscovering the same consciousness technologies that built the pyramids. This isn't about bridging science and spirituality. This is about recognizing that they were never separate in the first place. The ancients didn't have primitive superstitions. They had advanced technologies of consciousness that we're only now beginning to understand through our most sophisticated scientific instruments. The Great Convergence, when ancient wisdom meets modern science. For the past 3 centuries, Western science has operated under the assumption that consciousness is a byproduct of matter, that awareness somehow emerges from complex arrangements of unconscious particles. This materialist worldview has driven incredible technological advancement and created a fundamental split between scientific knowledge and spiritual understanding. But something extraordinary has happened in quantum physicists' laboratories over the last 100 years. Experiment after experiment has revealed that consciousness is not separate from physical reality. It's the fundamental creative force that shapes reality at its most basic level. It's not a discovery at all. It's a rediscovery of principles perfectly understood by ancient mystery schools, encoded in Hermetic texts, and applied by master practitioners for thousands of years. The Hermetic tradition, which originated in ancient Egypt and was attributed to the legendary figure of Hermes Trismegistus, preserved 7 fundamental principles that describe how consciousness creates and shapes reality. These weren't religious beliefs or philosophical concepts. They were practical technologies for working with the basic forces of existence. Modern quantum physics has validated these 7 principles with mathematical precision and experimental proof. What the ancients called the principle of mentalism, modern physics calls the measurement problem. What they called the principle of vibration, we call wave-particle duality. What they call the principle of correspondence, we call the holographic principle. The convergence is so complete and precise that it can no longer be dismissed as a coincidence. We are witnessing the scientific validation of humanity's most ancient and sophisticated understanding of reality. The first validation, the principle of mentalism and the observer effect. The first Hermetic principle states, "The all is mind, the universe is mental." This principle asserts that consciousness is the fundamental substance of reality, and that what we call physical matter is crystallized thought. For centuries, this principle was dismissed by mainstream science as primitive mysticism. Matter was considered solid, objective, and independent of consciousness. The universe was seen as a vast machine operating according to mechanical laws, with consciousness as an accidental byproduct of complex material processes. Then came the quantum revolution, beginning with Max Planck's discovery of the quantum nature of energy in 1900. As physicists probed deeper into the fundamental structure of matter, they made a shocking discovery. There is no solid matter at the quantum level. Atoms are mostly space. Even subatomic particles are not solid objects, but probability waves. mathematical descriptions of potential states. The most stunning validation of the principle of mentalism came with the discovery of the observer effect. When quantum physicists attempted to observe the behavior of subatomic particles, they found that the very act of observation changed the behavior of the particles. In the famous double-slit experiment, electrons behave like waves when unobserved, but like particles when observed. This discovery shattered the fundamental assumption of materialist science, that reality exists independently of consciousness. The observer effect proves that consciousness is not separate from physical reality, but is the creative force that collapses quantum possibilities into experienced reality. Modern physicists struggle to explain this phenomenon because they still operate from the assumption that consciousness emerges from matter. But the Hermetic masters understood it perfectly. Consciousness doesn't emerge from matter. Matter arises from consciousness. The observer effect is simply the natural result of consciousness exercising its fundamental creative function. The implications are staggering. If consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level, changing your consciousness changes your reality. This isn't positive thinking or wishful belief. It's applied quantum mechanics. The second validation, the principle of vibration and wave-particle duality. The second Hermetic principle declares, nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This principle teaches that all existence is vibrational, and that different rates of vibration create various forms of matter and energy. Ancient Hermetic masters understood that thoughts, emotions, physical objects, and spiritual states all exist as vibrational frequencies. They developed sophisticated techniques for controlling their vibrational state, tuning themselves to attract different realities. Modern physics has validated this principle through the discovery of wave-particle duality. Quantum mechanics reveals that all matter and energy exist simultaneously as waves and particles. The wave aspect represents the vibrational nature of existence that Hermetics described, while the particle aspect represents the crystallized form of vibration when observed by consciousness. Einstein's famous equation, E=mc2, demonstrates that matter and energy are interchangeable. Matter is simply energy vibrating at a specific frequency. This is precisely what the Hermetic masters taught. Physical form is crystallized vibration, and by changing your vibrational frequency, you can change your physical reality. The practical applications are profound. When you understand that everything is vibration, you realize that changing your thoughts and emotions changes your energetic frequency. This change in frequency attracts experiences, people, and circumstances that match your new vibrational state. Modern technology has given us tools to measure these vibrational changes. Heart rate variability monitors can detect changes in your electromagnetic field based on your emotional state. EEG machines can measure the frequency of your brain waves. Kirlian photography can capture changes in your energy field. These instruments measure precisely what the Hermetic masters described: the vibrational signature of consciousness expressing itself through the form. The ancients didn't need sophisticated instruments because they had developed internal sensitivity to these vibrational changes through years of practice and training. The third validation, the principle of correspondence and the holographic universe. The third Hermetic principle states, as above, so below, as below, so above. This principle reveals that the same patterns that govern the cosmos also govern individual consciousness, and that changes at one level automatically create corresponding changes at all other levels. Classical physics considered this principle mystical nonsense. which saw the universe as composed of separate objects interacting through mechanical forces. The idea that microscopic changes could instantly affect macroscopic reality violates the fundamental laws of physics. Then came the discovery of quantum entanglement, which Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. When particles become entangled, a change in one particle instantaneously affects the other, regardless of the distance between them. This phenomenon has been verified in countless experiments and forms the basis of emerging quantum technologies like quantum computing and cryptography. Even more remarkable is the holographic principle, which suggests that all the information in a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary. This means that every part of the universe contains information about the whole universe, precisely what the principle of correspondence describes. The holographic nature of reality explains how individual consciousness can affect universal patterns. Your personal energy field is not separate from the cosmic energy field. It's a localized expression of the same field. When you change your patterns, you change patterns in the universal field. This is why ancient masters could affect reality through internal practices alone. They understood that working on themselves was working on the universe, because the self and the universe are expressions of the same underlying pattern. Modern chaos theory has discovered similar principles in complex systems. The butterfly effect demonstrates how small initial conditions can create massive changes in complex systems over time. This is the principle of correspondence operating in mathematical form. The fourth validation, the principle of polarity and quantum superposition. The fourth Hermetic principle teaches everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. This principle reveals that apparent opposites are different degrees of the same thing, and that you can transmute any condition into its opposite by changing its vibrational frequency. Classical physics treated opposites as fundamentally different phenomena: hot and cold, positive and negative, and matter and antimatter were seen as distinct and separate realities. The idea that opposites could be transmuted into each other was considered impossible. Quantum mechanics has revealed that this classical view is incorrect. Quantum superposition demonstrates that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. An electron can be spinning both clockwise and counterclockwise at the same time. A photon can be both a wave and a particle, until measurement forces it to choose one state. This quantum reality perfectly validates the Hermetic understanding of polarity. Opposites are not separate realities, but different expressions of the same underlying potential. The Hermetic masters developed techniques for transmuting unwanted conditions into their opposites by changing the vibrational frequency of the underlying potential. Modern physics has discovered similar principles in antimatter research. When matter and antimatter meet, they don't destroy each other. They transmute into pure energy. This is precisely what the Hermetic masters described. Apparent opposites are different expressions of the same fundamental energy that can be transmitted from one form to another. The practical application involves recognizing that every unwanted condition in your life contains the energy needed to create its opposite. Fear includes the energy of courage. Lack contains the energy of abundance, and sickness contains the energy of health. By changing your relationship to these conditions, you can transmute them into their desired opposites. The fifth validation, the principle of rhythm and quantum field fluctuation. The fifth Hermetic principle states, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. This principle describes the rhythmic nature of all existence, from cosmic cycles to personal energy patterns. Ancient masters understood that the universe operates in cycles and that there are optimal times for different types of manifestation work. They developed sophisticated systems for timing their spiritual practices to align with supportive cosmic rhythms. Modern physics has discovered that even space is not truly empty, but is filled with quantum field fluctuations. Constant rhythmic energy patterns appearing and disappearing at the quantum level. These fluctuations follow precise mathematical patterns that govern the behavior of all matter and energy in the universe. The discovery of circadian rhythms has revealed that biological systems operate according to precise timing mechanisms synchronizing with cosmic cycles. Your body produces hormones, neurotransmitters, and other biochemicals following rhythmic patterns that align with solar, lunar, and seasonal cycles. Even more remarkable is the discovery that consciousness itself operates rhythmically. Brainwave patterns follow specific frequencies that correspond to different states of consciousness. Alpha waves, 8-12 Hz, correspond to relaxed awareness. Theta waves, 4-8 Hz, correspond to deep meditation and creativity. And gamma waves, 30-100 Hz, correspond to heightened awareness and spiritual experiences. These discoveries validate the Hermetic understanding that consciousness and the cosmos operate according to the same rhythmic principles. When you align your rhythms with cosmic rhythms, you work with the fundamental patterns that govern reality. The sixth validation, the principle of cause and effect and quantum determinism. The sixth Hermetic principle declares, every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. This principle teaches that nothing happens by chance and that every condition in your life results from specific causes operating through consciousness. Classical physics embraced a mechanistic view of cause and effect, where every event inevitably resulted from prior physical causes. This deterministic worldview leaves no room for consciousness to influence reality. Quantum mechanics has revealed a more subtle understanding of causation. While quantum events appear random at the individual level, they follow precise statistical patterns at the collective level. This suggests that consciousness operates as a hidden variable that influences the probability of quantum events without violating the laws of physics. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment demonstrates that the future can influence the past at the quantum level. This validates the Hermetic teaching that consciousness operates outside of linear time and can influence events through non-local connections. Modern neuroscience has discovered that consciousness can influence physical reality through neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on conscious intention and practice. Meditation, visualization, and other consciousness practices change the structure and function of the brain. The placebo effect demonstrates that belief alone can create measurable physiological changes. When patients believe they're receiving adequate treatment, their bodies often respond as if they received the treatment, even when given inactive substances. These discoveries validate the Hermetic understanding that consciousness is the ultimate cause behind all effects. You change the causal patterns that create your reality by changing your consciousness. The seventh validation, the principle of gender and quantum complementarity. The seventh Hermetic principle states, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. This principle describes the creative interplay between active and receptive forces that drive all manifestations. The masculine principle represents focused intention, directed will, and active creation. The feminine principle represents receptive awareness, intuitive wisdom, and creative flow. The Hermetic masters understood that both principles must work harmoniously for successful manifestation. Quantum mechanics has discovered a similar principle in wave-particle complementarity. Niels Bohr demonstrated that quantum objects exhibit complementary properties that cannot be measured simultaneously. The more precisely you measure a particle's position, the less precisely you can measure its momentum, and vice versa. This complementarity principle extends throughout quantum physics. Energy and time are complementary variables, as are electric and magnetic fields. These complementary pairs work together to create the fundamental forces that govern reality. The discovery of quantum spin reveals that even individual particles possess complementary properties. Electrons have both spin-up and spin-down states that exist in superposition until measured. This dual nature allows particles to store and process information in quantum computers. Modern brain research has revealed that consciousness itself operates through complementary processes. The left brain specializes in focused, analytical thinking, masculine principle, while the right brain specializes in holistic, intuitive processing, feminine principle. Optimal cognitive function requires the integration of both hemispheres. The practical application involves balancing focused intention with receptive awareness in your manifestation practice. The masculine principle sets clear intentions and maintains unwavering focus. The feminine principle remains open to how the manifestation will unfold and trusts the creative process. The implications: consciousness as the fundamental force. The convergence of quantum physics and Hermetic principles points to a revolutionary understanding of reality. Consciousness is not an emergent property of matter, but the fundamental creative force from which matter emerges. This understanding transforms every aspect of the human experience. If consciousness creates reality at the quantum level, then developing your consciousness is the most practical thing you can do to improve your life. Meditation, visualization, energy work, and other consciousness practices are not just spiritual pursuits. They're applied technologies for reality creation. The ancient mystery schools understood this and focused on consciousness development rather than external manipulation. They knew that changing consciousness changes everything else automatically. Modern science is beginning to develop technologies based on these principles. Quantum computers use consciousness-like properties of superposition and entanglement to process information. Biofeedback devices allow people to control physiological processes that are usually unconscious consciously. Virtual reality systems demonstrate how changing sensory input changes experienced reality. But the most powerful technology has always been consciousness itself. Properly trained and developed, the human mind can access and influence the quantum field directly. This is what the ancient masters achieved through decades of practice and training. The practical revolution: applying quantum Hermetic principles. Understanding the scientific validation of Hermetic principles is just the beginning. The fundamental transformation comes from applying these principles in daily life. When you know that consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level, every thought becomes a creative act. Every emotion becomes an energetic broadcast, and every intention becomes a probability influencer. The first practical application involves recognizing that your current reality perfectly reflects your current consciousness. Everything in your experience, your relationships, your health, your finances, your circumstances, exists because your consciousness somehow creates or allows it. This isn't blame, it's empowerment. If your consciousness is creating your current reality, then changing your consciousness can create a different reality. This change happens not through positive thinking or wishful belief, but through the systematic application of consciousness technologies that the ancients developed and modern science is now validating. The second application involves understanding that you're not separate from the reality you want to create. The consciousness that desires wealth is the same consciousness that experiences wealth. The awareness that seeks love is the same awareness that knows love. You're not trying to get something from outside yourself. You're recognizing something that already exists within the infinite potential of your consciousness. The third application involves working with the quantum field directly through consciousness practices. Meditation aligns your brainwaves with optimal frequencies for reality creation. Visualization programs the quantum field with specific probability patterns. Emotional coherence creates the energetic conditions for manifestation to occur. The future of human potential. We live at a unique moment in human history when ancient wisdom and modern science converge to reveal the true nature of reality and human potential. Our most sophisticated scientific instruments now validate the same principles that allowed ancient masters to perform seemingly miraculous feats. This convergence is not accidental. Humanity is evolving toward a more complete understanding of consciousness and its role in creating reality. We remember abilities that we never lost but forgot how to access. The implications extend far beyond personal development. When enough people understand and apply these principles, we can collectively create solutions to humanity's most significant challenges. Environmental problems, social conflicts, and economic inequalities are all expressions of consciousness patterns that can be transformed through the systematic application of quantum hermetic principles. The ancient masters knew that individual transformation and collective transformation are inseparable. As you develop your consciousness and apply these principles in your own life, you're contributing to the evolution of human consciousness as a whole. This is why the mystery schools guarded these teachings so carefully. They understood that consciousness technologies are the most potent forces in the universe and must be used with wisdom and responsibility. You're not accidentally watching this video. Your consciousness has drawn you to this information because you're ready to understand and apply these principles. You're part of a growing number of people who are remembering their true nature as conscious creators and stepping into their role as bridges between ancient wisdom and modern understanding. The question is not whether these principles work. Quantum physics has proven that they work with mathematical precision. The question is whether you're ready to take responsibility for your consciousness's creative power and use it to serve your highest potential and the highest good of all life. This responsibility requires dedication, practice, and a commitment to continuous learning and growth. The ancient masters spent years developing their understanding and abilities because they knew consciousness development was the most critical work any human being could undertake. But you don't have to start from scratch. The convergence of ancient wisdom and modern science has given us unprecedented access to consciousness technologies that were once available only to initiates of mystery schools. You can learn in months what once took years to master. The key is approaching this work with the same precision and dedication that quantum physicists bring to their research. These are not vague spiritual concepts, but precise technologies for working with the fundamental forces of reality. Start with one principle and work with it until you can apply it effortlessly. Study the quantum physics research that validates these ancient teachings. Practice the consciousness techniques that allow you to work with the quantum field directly. Most importantly, remember that you're not just learning about these principles. You're remembering your true nature as a conscious creator. The consciousness reading these words right now is the same consciousness that collapsed the first quantum wave function into physical reality. The ancient masters and modern physicists have given you the roadmap. The quantum field is waiting for your conscious participation. The only question remains: are you ready to step into your power as a conscious creator and help humanity remember its true potential? If you feel the call to bridge ancient wisdom with modern science, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell if this understanding resonates with your most profound knowledge. We will continue exploring the practical applications of these quantum hermetic principles, diving deeper into specific techniques for consciousness development and reality creation. Like this video, if it opens your eyes to the scientific validation of ancient wisdom, share it with anyone ready to understand their true nature as a conscious creator. Together, we're participating in the greatest awakening in human history, remembering who we are and what we're truly capable of when we align with the fundamental laws of reality. The universe is not a machine. It's a living field of consciousness, and you are its observer and creator. The question is, what reality will you choose to create?